Hey everybody, it's your boy Jack here, and today in this video I want to welcome you to part 2 of the Batman White Knight review series I'm doing here on this channel. Yeah, it's sort of like rhymes, but whatever. Besides that though, today in part 2 of the review, I'm going to be talking about some of the influences and and what kind of impact that they had in the comic itself. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about the nostalgia effect and how it sort of helped influence or what kind of impact it had on this comic. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about some of the cultural influences and the impact that it had, like cultures and societies in North America have sort of had on this comic. And lastly but not least, I'm going to be talking about the GTO and some of the real world aspects and also what kind of impact it has on the story itself. But besides that, if you haven't read the Batman White Knight series yet, and you're sort of interested in knowing what the series is about, I highly recommend checking out the announcement video that I did for this series, where I go in depth and talk about the series itself and what I like and what I dislike, and I give you a bit of an excerpt about what the story is about. So if you're interested in that, I'd highly recommend that. That's that. I'm going to formally now give you my spoiler warning, letting you know that from this point on, I'm going to be diving deep into the story's spoilers and what makes it such an amazing comic. So firstly, let's talk about nostalgia. So firstly, nostalgia is sort of that idea in your brain and everything that when you remember something from a long while ago or like a past memory or thought, you get that like sort of, that is like a good memory and everything. You get that sort of sense of like wistful affection and everything, that sort of warm and fuzzy feeling like of that good memory and everything in the past and stuff. And like we all sort of have those good memories and everything, or those callbacks and everything, and like in TV and media and stuff, we see that being used now more and more often, of the idea of nostalgia and like certain pasts and certain logos or certain callbacks and everything being used as a way of nostalgia to sort of remind somebody of that good warm fuzzy feeling and stuff, or like that sort of like proud kind of, oh, I recognize that kind of callback, that kind of thing. In a way, it's sort of being used to help trigger and like sort of provide like the viewer with like optimism and everything. We see this a lot in movies and everything, especially like the DC and the Marvel universe and everything. Obviously in the DC universe there's like millions of Easter eggs and everything. Those are examples of nostalgia. Bringing it back down to this comic, we can see nostalgia being used in many different aspects, but most notably I'm going to talk about these two aspects. Firstly, we can talk about the Batmobiles. In issue number 7 and issue number 8 of the series, we see the many different Batmobiles coming out and coming back and everything, and we see them a lot when like during the driving sequence and everything to the island and everything, and them having to drive through the secret tunnels and everything to get to that island. And in issue number 7 and issue number 8 of the series, we see some callbacks to some of the classic Batmobiles and other media sources. So let's take a look at them. So let's take a look at the Batmobiles and how they're referenced in the comic. So firstly, we can take a look at the 1996 Ford Lincoln concept car. This Batmobile was used as the original Batmobile in like sort of television and like movies and everything. It was used in the Batman the TV series, the original one with Adam West. It's used in this panel here on screen, in a part of this page. And it's like, I like how it's used and everything, and I really honestly like love that callback and everything, because obviously I get a bit of that nostalgia effect of, oh, that's such a cool callback. So secondly, we have the 1989 Tim Burton directed Batmobile. This is obviously the amazing, iconic Batmobile when Michael Keaton starred as Batman. And this is an awesome car. I love it. I actually took a picture with like one of these replicas a couple years ago. And it's such a cool car. Up next, we have the 1992 Batman the Animated Series Batmobile. This Batmobile is sort of iconic. I love the long, cartoony style of it. I also love about the series Mark Hamill like voicing the iconic Joker. How amazing is that? Lastly but not least, we see the 2005 Christopher Nolan Batmobile from the Batman the Dark Knight trilogy and everything. love this Batmobile, love how well it was thought out, love how amazing it was, and it's just so cool. I love that we got to see this sort of put into the comic. Now, besides the Batmobile subtly planted into the comic for nostalgia purposes, probably one of the biggest and best bombshells in the comic itself, and that has to be the reveal of Jason Todd. Now, Jason Todd, for those of you who don't know, is the second generation Robin. He was the successor to, or he took over Robin and like the whole Robin mantle after Dick Grayson decided to leave the Robin mantle and become Nightwing. He was sort of like the second generation Robin. Now, in the main DC timeline, which this book isn't actually based in, Jason Todd ends up dying in the Death of the Family comics. Spoilers. And everything. There's a whole big thing. There's a big moment. There's been in a bunch of politics and everything. And I'll link a video down below done by Variant Comics explaining the history of Jason Todd, who eventually becomes the comic book character called Red Hood. So if you're interested a bit about that backstory, I'll be down there. Besides that, though, in this main story's timeline, and in this world that John Murphy created, Jason Todd didn't die. Let me explain to you what ended up happening. So, in the comic, there's a whole conversation at the end of issue number 7, and I think partially in the beginning of issue number 8, discussing about the fact that where Batman and Jack Napier were in the Batmobile together, and Batman's like, yo, I need to know what happened to Jason Todd. Like, I raised this kid like a son. I wanted him to be the second Batman, all that kind of stuff. I want him to be my successor, all that kind of stuff. And, like, Jack Napier's like, I don't even know what even happened to him, but, like, let me try to, like, figure out what happened. And then, like, he basically, like, reaches into his mind, and, like, Jack Napier, he reaches into his mind, and it's like, oh, shoot, this is what happened to him. And here's what happens. So at the brutality of the Joker, he ends up kidnapping Jason Todd, which is sort of heavily hinted and everything, and like it's heavily hinted throughout the whole comic, the fact that Jason Todd ended up dying and stuff, and like even though there was no body, all that kind of stuff, and it was a whole complicated mess that they just kept on hinting at and stuff throughout the whole comic. Should explain that first. But the Joker kidnapped him and brutally tortured Jason Todd for, I think it's about 2 or 3 days. It was one of the reasons why Harley Quinn broke up with him. But he ended up brutally torturing this kid and everything. And like, you see the photos, it's like red, it's bloody, all that kind of stuff. It's PG-13, people. Like, that kind of like gruesomeness. But basically what ends up happening is Jason Todd gives up. He decides, you know what, I don't want to be Robin anymore. I don't want to be the Boy Wonder. I don't want to be Batman's sidekick. Like, can I just leave? Can I just form a new identity, leave Gotham, and live my own life? Joker obviously says, sure. Because in a way that sort of helps torture Batman even more, because he thinks that he's dead, all that kind of stuff, all that drama, all that that kind of stuff. And it's a whole thing. And that reveal was probably the best moment for me in the comic and everything. It was probably the biggest bombshell for sure, because although it was heavily hinted and stuff, and in a way it's easier to foreshadow and stuff, I just felt like it was such a great and well-placed moment in the comic. And I think this because you see how these two characters react. You have Jack Napier, a man who doesn't really know a lot about what he's done as the Joker. He doesn't really know a lot of the brutality and everything. He's just wanting to change the world of what the Joker's done and try to help and fix Gotham. And for that, like, for now knowing and realizing and like digging into his own mind and realizing that this is what he's done. He's tortured a kid. He tortured like somebody just for being associated to Batman and everything. It's just horrible. Like, it's like it's just such a great moment with Jack Napier, because it's like you see this sad depression, that like regret, that fear, the decision that like he wished he didn't do and everything, and like like, it's just depression, it's sad, it's suffering. He has to suffer through this, suffer through the fact that he did this to somebody, a kid, like, mind you. And it's like, that moment for me is just such a great reveal, because it's like, okay, damn. And like, for Jack Napier, he has to suffer through this, through the fact of that. And with Batman, you get a completely different reaction. As I mentioned in part 1 in the review, which I'll leave up here, Batman's whole theme as a character has been legacy. Meaning, what kind of legacy he's going to have to keep on Earth. Like, what kind of legacy that, like, what does legacy mean to him? Like, how he can sort of preserve the action of Batman and everything. And in a way, like, he was sort of training Jason Todd to be a future Batman, to take over the mantle of Batman when he's gone. And in a way, like, it's such a great emotional moment there, because throughout this comic and everything, Batman had to go through people dying and everything, and like his legacy changing, and the world changing around him, and suffering through that, and how his legacy will change. And in a way, it's a great moment, because it's like, once again, he has to confront legacy, but he has to do it on his own. He doesn't have anybody there besides the person that that has sort of been his anti-hero or his villain for the most part. And it's a great moment for me, at least, because I feel like, in a way, you get like two characters sort of put together in this situation that have to deal with sort of the same yet different emotions and everything, and you could sort of compare and contrast there. But it's just such an amazing moment, I think, and such an amazing conversation that was had. Moving forward, one of the things I wanted to look at in this review is the district of Backport, and like the influence and impact that it has on the comic itself. So firstly, let's sort of look at the district of Backport. So it's obviously a port, like, it's the main battleground for Batman and his villains and everything, and we see that throughout the comic, that continually the district keeps on getting destroyed and everything, and the infrastructure keeps on getting damaged and getting rebuilt and everything like that. Now, what I really like about this comic and everything is that they're able to sort of pinpoint like the economic divide in Gotham and the economic impact of Batman himself. And in a way, it's sort of like the Batman economy, and how Batman's sort of been able to help the rich separate the poor. And we see this with the rich sort of feeding off the wealth of Batman, feeding off the fact that, you know what, they can buy these properties in Backport, in the battleground of Batman, and like buy these properties for cheap, rebuild them, make them better, charge a higher rent and everything. And yet you see the citizens of Backport, and they're having to pay these higher taxes. They're having to sort of fend for themselves in the city. They're having to, they're sort of having to like come together and everything, and be used to like not really having a voice, or being used to sort of being discriminated against because of where they live. And in a way, we see economic discrimination and economic divides in like around the world. We see it in the US, we see it in Canada, and while doing my research and everything, most notably, like, I found this in the city of Chicago. And Chicago has sort of been well known for this like economic divide, or even racial prejudice, like, and racial discrimination in the different parts of Chicago. When doing my research, I was really fascinated with like the parallels, and in a way, it's sort of ironic that like this influence of Chicago is being used because in the Christopher Nolan trilogy, Chicago was one of the settings for Gotham itself, and it's sort of ironic that continually we see like Chicago being used as one of the cities of influence in the Batman comics. Now, if you sort of want to get a bit more of a deep dive into the citizens of Chicago are going through, or even a bit more of a better perspective of how the citizens of Backport are sort of being treated and everything, and their district themselves and what they go through, I highly recommend checking out the AJ Plus series, where they talking about Chicago and everything in the history of Chicago. I'll be linking that down below in the description. So if you're interested in that, I'd highly recommend that you check it out. Besides that, though, when it comes to this story, I feel like that although we see the citizens of Backport, the impact and the damage that has been had and everything, I feel like what's really been missing from this story is some grounded characters. And what I mean is the fact that I'd love to see characters who are actually citizens of the district of Backport, who are actually just citizens of Gotham themselves. Because I feel like we are seeing this sort of typical Batman storyline with the typical characters and everything, but I feel like by introducing a new character, like we've seen with Lieutenant Duke Thomas, I feel like by introducing Lieutenant Duke Thomas, or even his family and everything, and showing a storyline based off of the impact that Gotham has, like that Batman's had on the city, or seeing like the sort of the fight sequences that are being had between the Joker and Batman and everything in his eyes and in his perspective, it gets a completely different perspective. You don't look at this as like two like a hero and a villain fighting. You see this as a destruction of the city. So lastly but not least, let's talk about the GTO, aka the Gotham Terrorist Suppression Unit, and what kind of impact it has on the comic itself. For those of you who don't know, the GTO is an elite task force created by Jack Napier and James Gordon, and the whole idea of the GTO is to sort of regulate and create sort of a community of superheroes and stuff, and sort of end vigilantism in Gotham, and elite task force that allows superheroes not to be persecuted for justice and everything. And I really do like this twist and everything. I think it's a really great and creative way to change the comic right in the middle of it. It allows a lot of supporting characters to voice their own opinions and voice their own thoughts. For example, we see Nightwing, Batgirl, and even Lieutenant Duke Thomas and Police Commissioner Gordon sort of talk about this. And it's a really great idea and way to show other supporting characters and their opinions and everything. And I like that. And ultimately, in a way, it sort of isolates a lot of these characters and their own different opinions. But at the end of the day, it allows them to sort of unify and sort of come together as this elite task force or group and defeat the supervillains at the end of the day. And I think that's what's really great about this plot device is it, although it initially divides these characters and everything, it allows them to sort of come together and realize that, vigilantism is ultimately an evil in Gotham. And I think when it comes to the GTO, I like the fact that although it's been able to divide these characters, at the end of the day and in the last couple issues of the comic, you see that a lot of these characters need to come together and sort of want to come together in order to change Gotham for the better. And in a way, it sort of pushes Batman to sort of conform and pushes Batman to see how to change Gotham for the better and sort of in a way eliminate sort of the economy of vigilantism in Gotham. And what I like about the GTO is the fact that it closes this really big storyline in the main series of the comic itself, and then it allows the final issue to really focus on a smaller and simple storyline, focusing on the confrontation between the Joker, Jack Napier, and the new Joker herself, and the conflict there, and it's able to really close up some of the smaller storylines and the smaller moments in the comic and give really a well-satisfied finale, but also sort of leaves room for the sequel as well. But besides that, though, those are all the topics I'm going to be talking about in episode 2 of the Batman White Knight review. Thank you so much for sticking along this long. Let me know your thoughts below about some of the topics I talked about, what your favorite parts of the Batman White Knight series are, and your favorite character in DC Comics. Besides that, though, thank you so much for watching. My name is Shaq Skinner. Feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit post notifications if that's something that you are into. But besides that, though, if you're interested in knowing my views and my thoughts about the characters in the Batman White Knight series, I highly recommend checking out the first episode in this series, which I'll link down below and at the end screen. Besides that, though, thank you so much for watching. You guys have a good night, and bye!